Animal Crossing New Leaf is packed to the brim of interesting details and little things that you might not have noticed along the way. Details you probably don't need to know to play the game, but still are really interesting nonetheless. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at Animal Crossing New Leaf. So we have the game Animal Crossing New Leaf, right? But in Japan, the game is called Tobadasu Dobutsu no Mori, which roughly translates to Animal Forest Jump Out, which is quite a bit different than Animal Crossing New Leaf, which I find very fascinating, I guess. I mean, the Animal Forest thing makes sense. That was the name of the first game on the N64, but the jump out part, that's kind of clever. It's like the whole 3D thing. It was on the 3DS. Okay, have you ever looked at the store hours in Animal Crossing New Leaf, like the Nookling store and whatnot? Now, typically they have like standard hours that you would expect from any Animal Crossing game, but when you start messing with the ordinances, like the early bird ordinance or the one where like villagers will stay up later, sometimes the hours will shift, but not like in a uniform way, like just in some random subjective way. Like for instance, the base store in the game, typically speaking, it opens at 8 a.m., but it'll close at 10 p.m. Now, if you put a town ordinance for early bird residents, which makes everything open earlier, the town will now open 2 hours earlier at 6 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. and still close at 10 p.m. If you do the night owl ordinance, the store will open at 8 a.m., but now close at 12 a.m., 2 hours later. This makes sense. There's a 2-hour shift in either direction. But then if you have, say, the TNT Mart, the next upgrade to Nook's store in Animal Crossing New Leaf, its base hours are 7 a.m. to 12 a.m., meaning it now opens 1 hour earlier than before and closes 2 hours later. Now, if you have the early bird town ordinance in play, this time around, the store will only open 1 hour earlier, opening up at 6 a.m., which is like the start of a day. But if you put the night owl ordinance in play, the store will stay open all the way until 5 a.m., essentially giving you 5 extra hours of the store being open versus the 1 extra hour if you had the early bird store. I don't know, I just think this type of thing is kind of interesting and random. Also, in Animal Crossing New Leaf Welcome Amiibos update, they introduced the little ATM in front of your town hall that allows you to collect meow coupons for completing various tasks in your Animal Crossing New Leaf game. And these meow coupons can then be redeemed. And for the most part, a lot of people speculate that this actually served as the precursor for the whole Nook Miles and Nook Mile tickets that you could redeem in Animal Crossing New Horizons, which kind of makes sense. They're obviously connected here. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, there are 12 different types of fruit that you can have in your town. You have the 5 possible fruit that could be your native fruit in your town: an apple, cherry, orange, peach, or pear. Then over on the special island, there are 4 other types of fruit you could potentially get: a durian, lemon, lychee, or mango. Then palm trees have 2 different variants. There's a banana variant and a coconut variant. And then there's like a special rare fruit known as a persimmon, which you can only get either if a villager gives it to you or you get it at the TNT Emporium, which is like the fully upgraded Timmy and Tommy Nook store. But wait, there's more. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, the perfect fruit were introduced, which essentially look like the regular native fruit options, those 5 we talked about, but have a slightly different appearance to them, and they sell for way more money. Now, interestingly enough, every single player starts with 1 perfect fruit somewhere in their town on day 1 when they start up their game. And of course, you can sell it for more bells, but if you plant it, you can grow a perfect fruit tree that will harvest a couple of times perfect fruit for players until eventually it stops producing fruit. This could be a big money-making option for some players out there, or if you don't have a green thumb like me, you might not even notice that you have a perfect fruit just sitting there in a tree. Now, we all know about all the different flowers that show up in newer games like Animal Crossing New Horizons, but Animal Crossing New Leaf actually had 2 different types of flower variants that did not make its way into Animal Crossing New Horizons. They didn't graduate with the rest. They dropped out and just stayed in New Leaf. But we're talking about the carnation variant of flowers and the violets variant of flowers. These did not make it into the next generation of Animal Crossing. However, bamboo, on the other hand, which did make it into New Horizons, was originally introduced for the first time in Animal Crossing in New Leaf. I actually thought bamboo existed in the older games for some reason, but I guess that's just like some Mandela effect in my head. But no, bamboo first was shown off in Animal Crossing New Leaf. Now, this next one I haven't tested yet, but apparently if you dress up in a full pirate outfit, or if you have another fun outfit like a full ninja outfit, you can actually get unique dialogue from different villagers when you approach them dressed up like this. I think that's really cool. Also, frogs don't use umbrellas, just as a side fact. Okay, here's a kind of useless tip. If you are wearing a wetsuit, you can jump off a cliff as long as it overlooks the ocean and not a beach, which is kind of cool. KK Slider has a very specific taste when it comes to a coffee, he likes a mocha with no milk or sugar. Good luck figuring that one out. Animal Crossing New Leaf was actually the first Animal Crossing game to introduce the ribbon eel. Now, interestingly enough, the ribbon eel in Animal Crossing New Horizons can be found anywhere, but in New Leaf, it can only be found in the sea surrounding Tortimer Island, meaning you won't be able to go find it if you go out to like a beach or something in your main island. You have to travel to Tortimer's Island to catch this guy. Animal Crossing New Leaf was actually the last game to show the family of snowmen in the traditional form. There was the snowman, the snowmam, and the snow tyke, and those were like the little family of snowmen people. Now this sad family melted away and would be replaced by snow boys in Animal Crossing New Horizons, and they really weren't all that different. Maybe a little more cryptic, maybe a little more depressing, but yeah, these guys are missed, even though they still kind of exist mostly. I do think it's a little bit funny though that these guys are sometimes referred to as snow people from time to time. Animal Crossing New Leaf was also the last Animal Crossing game to have the traditional sense of the gold and silver slingshot. Now in New Leaf, the silver and gold slingshots would shoot 2 pellets and 3 pellets respectively, and were collected based on how many things you've shot down. After a while, you would get them gifted to you through balloons floating through the sky. New Horizons got away with the traditional silver and gold ones though, and replaced it with just the single gold slingshot, which doesn't actually shoot any more pellets than just one slingshot. It's just a little bit stronger than a regular slingshot, so it doesn't break where you have to recraft it constantly. Okay, now let's talk about Pashmina the goat, who was introduced right here in Animal Crossing New Leaf and also appeared in Animal Crossing New Horizons, but never appeared in Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. Now, she's unique because she's the only sisterly villager personality that is a goat in all of Animal Crossing, and her name actually originates from the word Pashmina, which is like the finest type of cashmere wool. So hey, the more you know. Okay, if you're traveling online to the tropical island, like through the Wi-Fi connection, and your internet is like super slow or lagging for some reason, after a little bit of time, like 3 minutes into the loading screen, Tap-In will actually begin playing Totaka's song, which is the hidden musical song that's been in like every game Kasumi Totaka has worked on in Nintendo history. The Animal Crossing game series is no different, but you can find New Leaf's little Easter egg right here. In the game Wario Get It Together, there is a game inspired by Animal Crossing New Leaf, and in that micro game, Marshall is one of 3 possible villagers alongside Fauna and Goldie that can appear in this mini game, but it's significant because Marshall also is the newest Animal Crossing character who was introduced right here in Animal Crossing New Leaf. They wanted to make a squirrel that had a smug personality, and they chose Marshall, and honestly, it kind of fits. I think a lot of people ended up liking Marshall after his introduction in New Leaf. Will he always be the only smug squirrel in all of Animal Crossing? We don't know, but for now, he is. Okay, this next one is wild. I didn't believe it at first, and I had to go frame by frame looking into stuff to see if this one's true. But if you go to the official Nintendo YouTube channel 10 years ago on a video called Nintendo 3DS Animal Crossing New Leaf Tourism, and you watch the video, maybe very slowly and closely, allegedly there's a villager in the background wearing a shirt that says NTDO 1889, which would be a reference to the year that Nintendo was founded in, as it originally started out as a company making Hanafuda cards in 1889. So we went to this video where this legendary Easter egg may or may not exist, and we watched it frame by frame slowly, and right there around the 1 minute 14 second mark and to the end of the trailer, you can see the villager character right here just wearing the shirt. You didn't have to zoom in and enhance or anything. It was just a very obvious thing, but yeah, I never knew that. What's really interesting is I've used this villager before as key art for things like thumbnails, and have used this PNG of a villager many times, and never have I noticed this on the shirt. But yeah, it's just the default shirt that this character wears for all of the marketing material of Animal Crossing New Leaf, and somehow I missed it. Also in Animal Crossing New Leaf, the North American and European versions of these games actually have a feature not included in the Japanese version of the game, and that's the ability to download example home layouts in the Happy Home Showcase from Nintendo directly using internet with that whole Spot Pass feature, in addition to the regular Street Pass way that was in the original Japanese release of the game. This is interesting. The decision was actually made because there are so many people in North America and Europe who live more out in rural areas, unlike Japan, where people constantly travel and pass each other in tight proximity. If you're in Japan or somewhere like Tokyo, back then you'd have an easy time finding someone on Street Pass and sharing information with them just by walking by, where you could later go check out their house and layout. But if you're in a more out there area, you probably would have a lot harder time running into someone who randomly also had their 3DS on with them. So at least this gave some use to the whole Happy home house thing that was built into New Leaf, even if you couldn't use it the way that it originally was intended. Also, this one's a little bit silly, but it's something I recently found out when playing New Leaf again, but I'd completely forgotten about it. If you're playing Animal Crossing New Leaf, Isabelle requires you to sit at the mayor chair if you want to talk about mayor-related duties, but then you have to go to the counter if you just want to talk about normal city or town-related duties, like changing the flag or whatever. Isabelle won't let you just like talk to her. Also, Animal Crossing New Leaf was the first Animal Crossing game to introduce bulk fossil identifying to Blathers. So before, every time you had fossils you want to have identified, you had to take them to Blathers, and one by one he would look at them and tell you what they are and whether or not they have them in the museum. But New Leaf was like, hey, you know what? Just all at once, he'll just give them back to you, and then you can decide if you want to donate them on your own. That was such a nice quality of life improvement, trust me. We came all the way from the GameCube days of having to mail our fossils off to get identified at some other museum to just being able to like be like, hey, Blathers, check out my inventory. Tell me what all these are right now. One step. Okay, in Animal Crossing, when's Festivale? I mean, typically you'll think like sometime in January or February, but in New Leaf, there's actually like an equation based on when Festivale will show up in your town. Now, this is according to the official Animal Crossing New Leaf Premia Guide, which we've talked about in the past, that has been known for maybe having some inaccuracies here and there, but we're gonna hope that it is accurate because the book itself only tells us as far as 2016 for Festivale, and then just gives us the equation to figure it out for afterwards. But essentially, Festivale occurs on the Monday 40 days before Easter, not including Sundays. What is this equation? Technically, if you get more in depth here, that means that if this whole holiday is based on Easter, it even has a more extreme moving date than other types of examples of this, because Easter itself is already on a moving date. Now, in general, to determine what day Easter falls on every year, Easter Sunday typically falls on the first Sunday after the full moon that occurs on or after the March or spring equinox. This is because Easter is based on the lunar cycles of the Jewish calendar, as the Last Supper was a Passover feast. So Easter can pretty much fall on any day between the end of March and mid-April, which means in turn we have to subtract all these days to figure out Festivale. It's kind of interesting how overly complicated this is, but something unique to Animal Crossing because now there's this like extra holiday that you probably won't see coming. Also, in that Premia Guide with Animal Crossing New Leaf that's known for having some inaccuracies in it, for whatever reason, this page that talks about the roost just has like a bunch of random chicken villagers on it. I don't know if that's relevant or just like something that someone just chose to do for fun, but here we are. Okay, another thing that a lot of people forget about from the early days of playing Animal Crossing New Leaf that I recently have uncovered again is that if you want to do things as a mayor, you have to get an 100% approval rating as mayor in your town. Can you imagine if real life worked this way and bureaucracy required there to be a 100% approval rate for anything? It would be wild. Also, just interesting because of how the special characters are kind of distributed across the main street in this game. Because Timmy and Tommy exclusively run the store, this is the first Animal Crossing game not to have a Nook's Cranny. Instead, it's called Nookling Junction. It's the same thing pretty much, but I guess it was so that they could have their own special branding. This would be undone in Animal Crossing New Horizons, where they go back to working at Nook's Cranny, even if Tom Nook's not there. In the big update, Animal Crossing New Leaf Welcome Amiibo, they added the ability to sit on rocks. Also, can we talk about how New Leaf had the biggest version of the Able Sisters shop if you fully upgraded it, because of the fact that you had Kicks there, and you also had the third Able Sister running a little like accessory store. Okay, development on Animal Crossing New Leaf is a little bit unique compared to other games, and we did a whole video on like the development of the entire Animal Crossing franchise, but the game was produced by Katsuya Iguchi, who was the original mind behind Animal Crossing, but this time the game was directed by a two-person team of Isao Moro and Aya Kyogoku. It's always interesting whenever a big game like this is produced or directed by two people, but the fact that they kind of had this three-person team serving as the main producer and directors is very different than how a lot of games are created nowadays. Now, both of these two had previously worked under the director for Animal Crossing City Folk on the Wii, so they likely were good candidates. Interestingly enough, though, after the release of Animal Crossing New Leaf, Isao Moro would end up leaving Nintendo, and Aya Kyogoku would continue as the director for the Animal Crossing franchise moving forward, and would direct Animal Crossing New Horizons. Okay, Animal Crossing New Leaf did a lot for for kind of branding characters. Like for instance, Tom Nook got his green sweater. That's a big deal. And Isabelle was also introduced. But it's interesting that the green sweater became so iconic for Tom Nook that even after New Horizons saw Tom Nook completely redesigned for his New Horizons look, the green sweater was still used for Animal Crossing merchandise and for promotional events, even promoting New Horizons. A lot of the time, Tom Nook is still in his green sweater outfit. It's likely that they're using the same suit from back in the New Leaf days, but it is interesting that this one piece of New Leaf art has prevailed all of this time later. There's a studio in Japan known as monolithsoft, and they're known for making like the Xenoblade Chronicle games, but they also have a reputation of working as a big support studio for Nintendo. Besides working on games like Super Smash Bros. 4 and The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, the first Animal Crossing game that this studio worked on was in fact Animal Crossing New Leaf. And interestingly enough, they would continue to be a support studio for Nintendo after that, working on the Splatoon trilogy, Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, but they also worked on Animal Crossing New Horizons. And you don't ever really think about other studios contributing to an Animal Crossing game because it's such an integral piece of Nintendo media, but yeah, Nintendo has reached out for some help from other studios for some of their games. When trying to come up with the different types of animals that would be featured in Animal Crossing New Leaf, the design coordinator Koji Takahashi actually said that it was hard to come up with new animal species to represent some of the town folks, but when looking at Reese and Cyrus, they decided to use alpacas because they're popular in the country. But it's also likely that the alpacas were chosen due to the fact that the 3DS technology was a big deal, and alpacas are kind of taller types of animals, so this like height difference with the 3D tech could go well together. Okay, if you're in Australia, EB Games had an exclusive deal for Animal Crossing New Leaf pre-orderers where they would get a little model figure of Town Hall alongside the character Isabelle. Now, this pre-order would also go out to other game retailers in Europe and are kind of rare, but also kind of cool. They're not like super rare, but relatively unique just because of the fact that it was there during the launch way back in the New Leaf days. In Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS and Wii U, while these games were marketed together and kind of advertised together and had some sort of cross compatibility, the 3DS and Wii U versions had different maps. And on the 3DS version of the game, there is a Tortimer's Island, which is based off of Tortimer's Island from Animal Crossing New Leaf. Also, while the Villager was introduced for Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, Isabelle, who was kind of the new character introduced in New Leaf, was added in as an assist trophy for this Smash Bros. Game, though she'd later be promoted to a full-on character in the Super Smash Bros. Roster. One of the biggest features of Animal Crossing New Leaf were the addition of public works projects that you get to pick and choose from as the new mayor. But one thing that's really cool is a lot of these public works ideas were originally introduced into Animal Crossing back in Dobutsu no Mori E+, which was essentially like the final ultimate version of Animal Crossing released only in Japan that had extra features. We've talked about how this game is special before, but it's really interesting to see how these ideas that were put in a GameCube game finally made their way to the 3DS all of those years later. The year 2024 is the last year that many of us will be able to utilize some online functionality in Animal Crossing New Leaf, as the 3DS's online services will finally shut down, which is really tragic. If we want to look back to the beginning of the 3DS's life, all the way back in 2010, when they were trying to promote the 3DS that would be coming out, they actually had 3DS's on display at E3, and they had Animal Crossing gameplay footage available so that people could see the visual demonstration of the 3D technology. This demo of the game wasn't actually playable for the public, but it was cool that they were able to show off some 3D stuff using Animal Crossing. New Zealand and Australia were actually the last main region to get Animal Crossing New Leaf. It released in New Zealand and Australia one day after Europe got the game. Europe got the game 6 days after North America got the game. North America got the game 4 months after South Korea got the game, and South Korea got the game 7 months after Japan got the game. I'm honestly really glad that Animal Crossing went and pivoted into a universal release type thing, where most Nintendo games in general and Animal Crossing games now release globally at the same time, which is kind of nice. Okay, remember back in the 2000s, the player's choice tag was this like thing Nintendo would put on their games, so you knew that the games that they were selling were good and awesome, and a lot of people had already bought them. You might even remember seeing these on like GameCube cases with the little yellow thing at the top corner. In 2010 though, Nintendo actually sunsetted this and replaced it with a new program which they called Nintendo Selects, which would feature special games that sold well in usually a lower price point than the initial debut price. And then the big difference was the packaging was different. It kind of had the big Nintendo Select stuff so you could see it easily on store shelves. Animal Crossing New Leaf sold well enough that it graduated into this program in August of 2016, which is really interesting because for just a couple of months, you could pick up a copy of Animal Crossing New Leaf that looked like this. It was the original New Leaf box, but in the Nintendo Selects case. But just a few months later, in also 2016, the Animal Crossing Welcome Amiibo update released into New Leaf, which was a free update that added a ton of new content to Animal Crossing New Leaf, and it was updated for all players, no matter which version of the game you had. However, this meant that they also had to go back and update the box for Animal Crossing for the big Welcome Amiibo release, so the box would change again to look like this right afterwards. Just interesting to see that these boxes changed like twice in a single year. Oddly enough though, Nintendo has not used the Selects program since the release of Nintendo Switch, and we don't really know if Nintendo will ever actually bring this stuff back. Okay, Shampoodle is one of the cooler unlocks in Animal Crossing New Leaf because this whole thing has kind of evolved from what it was like in City Folk. Of course, you have to spend 10,000 bells at the Able Sisters or Kix, and then 10 days have to pass since the Kix store was built. But after all of that, if you do finally get Shampoodle, you'll have the ability to change your eye color with contacts, which was a big new addition, which wasn't in any of the other Animal Crossing games before. So being able to change your eyes was awesome. You know, it's always interesting looking at some of the 3DS functionality that was promoted so heavily with Animal Crossing New Leaf. Like, remember with the 3DS and the 3D camera built in, you could do stuff like AR, augmented reality, and they had like these AR cards associated with 3DSs. But one of the features that tied into Animal Crossing New Leaf was the fact that you could use the special 3DS camera and have your villagers summoned into real life pictures by using special amiibo cards. I think you could also summon the villagers that you had in your town, but if you wanted any villager, you needed the amiibo card for it. But still, it's kind of cool that you could take pictures, I guess, with your villagers. I don't know when you'd ever really want to use this. Okay, in Animal Crossing New Leaf, when it first released, before all of the big updates, every time you bought wrapping paper, Timmy and Tommy would explain how to use wrapping paper to the player. And that would happen every single time, no matter what, no matter how annoying it got. Fortunately, this was something that was kind of annoying, and Nintendo realized it and updated it when the big Animal Crossing Welcome Amiibo update finally did come out years later. But it is kind of interesting that this lasted so long into the game's life, where you'd have to read through this dialogue on how wrapping paper works so often. I mean, I guess it depends how often you buy wrapping paper, but still, you get what I mean. You know, Animal Crossing New Leaf was also the first Animal Crossing game to introduce the fan favorite character, Muffy. She's this like black sheep that has purple striped horns, and might also be one of the first gothic Animal Crossing characters to exist, and why not? Let's go with it. She is a sisterly villager with a birthday on Valentine's Day, so I feel like this kind of all comes together and sounds fitting if we were to count this as the first gothic Animal Crossing character, but I'll let you guys decide if that's actually the case here. But man, Animal Crossing New Leaf definitely delivered when it came to sheep villagers, because we also got Freda, another sisterly sheep villager, but this one is inspired by like a hot dog or something. I don't really know what I'm looking at. Now what's interesting is Freda is actually named Wendy in Japan, and it's supposed to be like a play on the fast food restaurant Wendy's, and her character is based off of like fast food, I guess. Considering the fact that in Animal Crossing New Horizons, the fast food chain Wendy's actually played New Horizons and had a whole island that they would promote for a while, it is interesting that they never did anything with our character Freda here. And then this character's like little catchphrase thing that they say is OU, which is like play on the word you, which is like a form of a female sheep. This character is a walking meme. I love it. I love the like self-awareness in the writing, I guess, that they chose for this character. Now, to be fair, when I said that this character looked like a hot dog, that was mostly talking about the New Horizons appearance, even though this character originally started out in New Leaf, back when the sheep only wore scarves and not like full clothes. So originally, Wendy actually looked like a cheeseburger because the back of her head is literally a cheeseburger. The whole hot dog aesthetic wasn't added until later on. So this character is like a gift that started giving early on and then just continued to give through the lifetime of this character. Also, Animal Crossing New Leaf introduced Julian to the cast of characters, and he's obviously based off of a unicorn, but what's interesting is there's only actually a handful of Animal Crossing villagers to be based off of mythological creatures rather than real world creatures that actually exist or existed in the past. The only characters to be completely based off of faith Greek mythological creatures are Phoebe, who's based off of Phoenix, Drago, who's based on a dragon, Hans, who's based on a Yeti, and the 2 dodo birds from New Horizons. I don't think dodos ever existed. What's also interesting is that both Phoebe, Drago, and Hans, and Julian, were all introduced in Animal Crossing New Leaf, which meant that mythological creatures were only an addition that was decided intentionally to be added in for that new game, which I think is pretty cool that we have this little thing that's unique to New Leaf and something that hasn't really been expanded on too much into the future, so it kind of stays this little like special thing about Animal Crossing New Leaf and what additions that they chose to add to this game. For a long time in the older Animal Crossing games, there were only 2 total octopus type villagers, Marina and Octavian. However, Animal Crossing New Leaf was the first game to finally set out to make a big difference here, and they introduced a brand new villager for New Leaf who was also an octopus by the character Zucker. But that's not it technically when it comes to New Leaf though, because then New Leaf did the Welcome Amiibo update and added in another villager by the character Inkwell, giving a whole extra octopus. So instead of 2, they were now up to 4 total octopus villagers. However, since Inkwell was an Amiibo only character and you can only get him by like scanning him into your Animal Crossing New Leaf game, he would never appear again. So Animal Crossing New Leaf was also his final Animal Crossing appearance, which I guess counts as a New Leaf fact as well. Okay, but finally, later on in the Animal Crossing New Horizons 2.0 update, they did add another octopus so we could be whole again, and they introduced the character Cephalobot, which honestly, pretty clever name. I kind of support this. So not only is he now the new 4th octopus character because they got rid of the old one, but he also technically is like the 4th robot villager introduced to Animal Crossing, which is like a whole nother rabbit hole we'll have to look into at some point. I don't know if I have the mental capacity to go through all of that today, but hey, it's something. Still, we gotta pour one out for our fallen homie Inkwell. May he rest in peace. Also, I don't feel like too many people ever talk about how successful Animal Crossing New Leaf truly was for its time. This game came out on the 3DS, which was already struggling in the first couple of years sales-wise, and still managed to sell over 3 million copies in Japan alone, and overall it would end up selling 100 million copies, making it the 5th best-selling game on the Nintendo 3DS overall. The game still scored an 88 out of 100 with Metacritic, though I do think it should have been maybe a little bit higher, but some people just don't understand Animal Crossing. Still, nonetheless, it is impressive to see how successful New Leaf really was for its time, even if it doesn't pale in comparison to how well New Horizons did after its launch. The thing though New Leaf does have over Animal Crossing New Horizons though is that in Animal Crossing New Leaf Welcome Amiibo, they added mini-games, and New Horizons doesn't have mini-games, unfortunately. Now, New Leaf's mini-games were kind of interesting. There was this Puzzle League game, which some of you may have heard of Pokemon Puzzle League from back in the day. Well, that's back, but this time it's Animal Crossing themed. And then there was this other mini-game called Desert Island Escape, which sounds so much more intense than it actually is. Now, to gain access to these mini-games, all you have to do is obtain a Nintendo 3DS XL or new Nintendo 3DS XL furniture if you want to play the Puzzle League game, or you can get the Wii U furniture piece if you want to play the Desert Island Escape. Also, I'm always impressed with this update that they did years after the release of a game, because you don't see Nintendo really go back and update a game so long after its initial release, but here we were with Animal Crossing New Leaf. And they did add some really interesting things that you'd never think Nintendo of all companies would add in. Like, they added the feature to share screenshots from Animal Crossing New Leaf directly to Facebook and Twitter with a dedicated button. But they also patched out some of the out-of-bound glitches that were popular from the base release of the game, so I guess Nintendo takes and they give, or whatever the saying is. Also, if you take a close look at Animal Crossing New Leaf's box art in Japan, it is different obviously from the US version of the game, but yeah, there's this like white picket fence that goes across the bottom where it kind of sits in the backdrop of the text that shows the title of the game. We don't get a picket fence in the Western release of the game. Also, I don't know how I never noticed this, but on the box art release of the original version of New Leaf, not the later re-released versions of the game, you can see over on the far left side the Tokyo Tower, which is something that I never noticed somehow all of these years later until just recently when I was looking stuff up for this specific video. The Tokyo Tower is something that you can unlock in the game as a public works project and put it up in your city, and it's definitely not the Eiffel Tower like I might have once thought in a previous video where I mentioned that it actually existed, and I ended up looking rather funny. Also, in Animal Crossing New Leaf, there's something kind of unique that I also haven't experienced, but I'm excited to actually look into. But on the winter solstice, which is December 21st, the game itself won't have the sun come up. It'll just be a full day of nighttime, I guess, because obviously the winter solstice is supposed to be like the shortest day of the year. So they kind of did something special to play into that, which I think is really cool. Something that wasn't brought back in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And then alternatively, they do have like extended daytime hours on the summer solstice equivalent of June 21st, where the sun will stay up for longer. So that's pretty cool. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button down below and maybe subscribe if you're new. I know if you're watching this on TV, it takes like an extra second, but I appreciate like the energy that you put into that. If this video does well enough, we probably will go and do like another deep dive into some of the other Animal Crossing games besides New Leaf. One day I want to make like this ultimate video that has just like everything that we could possibly know. So if there's anything we missed about New Leaf that you think needs to make into a big ultimate video, leave it in the comments too. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Check out some of the other videos we did, and we'll see you next time with a brand new video.